All right, before we finish chapter 14, I want to talk about our upcoming exam 2. So exam 2 is going to be Wednesday, March 18th. Note that's not next week, it's the following week because next week is spring break. So we'll have spring break next week and then we'll come back and that first Wednesday will be the exam. Format's going to be very similar or identical to the first one. You're going to have full 2 hours. You should bring a calculator. You want to make sure it's a scientific calculator. There will be a periodic table and useful information provided with the test. You can find them on Blackboard. You know, all the like pH equations, all those acidity equations, all that stuff will be on there. There's also now more reference information. So there's like tables of dissociation constants for weak acids. I really encourage you to look at the useful information that's posted on Blackboard and use it when you are working through the lecture material, or especially when you're studying, right? To kind of get used to like what you can look up, how you can look it up. The review, there's a review in the exam 2 folder on Blackboard, and the questions on that exam 2 folder assume you're using the useful information. So anything you would need to look up, like dissociation constants, is in the useful information on the test. That will be provided. So it's the same sort of useful information that applies. The test will cover weeks 5 through 8, so that's everything since the first test. Now, that being said, and so it'll only cover chapters 13 and 14. That being said, there are some ideas from those chapters that we're still using, right? Like molarity was in chapter 11. We're still using molarity, but like kinetics, there is some discussion of kinetics in terms of like defining equilibrium, right? That the forward and reverse reactions have the same rate. But I will only ask you questions about topics from chapters 11, 12, and 10, 11, and 12 as it pertains to 13 and 14. I'm not going to ask you about like integrated rate laws or just figure something out. But any molarity that we've used in chapters 13 and 14, some discussion of kinetics, not really much about intermolecular forces, but you know, like those kinds of things, talking about solutions in the context of chapters 13 and 14 is the only way it'll come up. But there won't be any just questions like, is this soluble? Or what's the rate of this, right? Because those are questions from before. So it'll just be chapter 13 and 14 questions, which might include some tools that we learned in, especially chapter 11. The format of the test is going to look exactly like the first one. Really be on the lookout for those bold and underlined instructions. Explain how you know. When you're explaining how you know something, you're not just rewriting something, right? So is something soluble? Explain how you know. If you say it's soluble because it dissolves in water, you're just redefining what solubility means. You know, instead you'd want to say it's soluble because it dissolves in water, because it's a polar compound, because it has OH and like dissolves like water's polar. Is it a weak acid? It's a weak acid because it doesn't fully dissolve in water. That's not explaining how you know, that's defining a weak acid. You explain because it has a Ka less than 1, or it's on the table of weak acids or whatever. It's not on the strong acid table, something like that. Or it's not in the list of strong acids, ergo it's a weak acid. That's how I know. I want you to explain your thought process, not just redefine terms whenever you're explaining your answer. Make sure you use units on anything calculation-wise. You know, things have units for a reason, and when you're including those units, you're conveying that you understand what those numbers are. This isn't just a math class. These numbers represent physical quantities when we're computing them, and you know, you're demonstrating you know what these physical quantities represent, right? A concentration, a mass, a volume, a temperature, whatever it is. In terms of preparation, you know, I strongly encourage you to take a look at the review, look at the lecture slides, go over participation questions again. Make sure you do the week 8 material, the participations, the homework. This stuff will be on the test. Beyond that, you know, whatever worked for test 1, do it again. If it didn't work for test 1, don't do it again, right? Do some experimentation, play around with changing up your habits, changing up your process, and see how you could make improvements. You know, you can also think about like, where did you struggle on test 1? What types of questions? Was it all the workout stuff? Was it more explanation stuff, right? You have the test, you can go look, where did you not get points? Maybe change how you're studying those things. Talk to me about it. We can certainly meet and talk about how to better approach those problems, what more I'm looking for. Okay, otherwise we got to get through week 8. So full week, normal schedule. If you have any questions about the test, you want me to talk about material or anything like that, let me know. Otherwise, enjoy this last week before spring break. But this week doesn't end. This week doesn't. Spring break doesn't start till Monday, so we still got stuff over this upcoming weekend. Make sure we finish this week strong in preparation for the test that's after spring break. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, enjoy the videos.